We've already had some really interesting presentations, so we'll crack on now. We've been talking a lot about the theory and some of the realities of implementation within organisations. So now we're going to have another session with a speaker talking about actually getting things done and implementing them in a well-known, high-profile organisation. So please join me in welcoming Sukant Saddi, who's Executive General Manager for Automation at Suncorp.
So I'm going to talk about the Suncorp journey on the automation in the automation space, and primarily I'll start with the fact that we actually we haven't been there around that long in terms of automation. It's only been about 18 months to 2 years, and we started with and tentatively, cautiously stepping into it. We thought, we'll give it a go. It was something. The vendors started talking to us about this, and there's a lot of conversation about proof of concept, and I'm sure everyone in the room has actually experimented with it, or you've been on the buy side, you've heard about the proof of concept. And we thought that was a bit like buying a toy, because the idea was we'll bring something, we'll build a toy, we'll build a bot, and then you see how that goes, and if you like it, we can do it for you in production. While that's quite a compelling idea, because quite often the partners are willing to invest in it. The challenge with that is it is essentially a toy. It'll work, it'll show you what it does, but you won't necessarily be using it in your BAU operation. So you're not actually sure what value you'll get out of it. So we expanded that concept. We said, we'll invest ourselves to some extent, but what we want is a proof of value. So proof of concept was essentially, would it be accurate? What sort of automation profile of a process, project implementation, IP rights, etc. But we actually expanded that to partner investment on an ongoing basis. How do you actually make sure that it keeps running? Maintenance, support. But these are just some metrics, but some dimensions of it. The idea, the philosophy behind that was, would it continue working in BAU? And would our people know how to actually use it? And that's a very important question, because to give you a context of where my team sits, we actually sit in people experience or HR, as opposed to technology or operations or anywhere else. And the reason for that is we believe in the virtual workforce construct, which is bots. And so building a bot, I don't know if you've actually seen one being built. It's not that hard. It isn't complex algorithms, at least in RPA. Even in AI, I think a lot of the complex math has already been done. It's all about how do you actually float it, how do you do the plumbing for it to run with your systems, and for it to continue running and delivering value. So we did that, and this turned out to be quite a good value for us. So I'll just talk about two bots that we built, the first two bots. One was named Sunny, so from Suncorp, not very inventive there, but and the other one was Max, after Mad Max. So Sunny was actually a bot that would write letters of offer for employees joining the firm or moving within the firm. And it's a pretty rote process, and we had about 3 to 4 people offshore working on this for us. One of our partners did the job. And what it involves, while it sounds like a very simple process, it is complex, and it's the fact that there's about 150 different variables to go through, whether you're a temp, casual, permanent employee, where you're based, what sort of legislation applies, all those factors exist. And the bot had all these complex rules defined, where it would actually go in and select the clauses and put them in a template. And voila, you'll have your letter of, your contract ready. So the benefit of this, when we started running this, the toy was working well. When it went into BAU, it was still working well. And it was the turnaround time for someone to put in a request for a new employee and the contract actually getting in the hands was about 72 hours. That got reduced to 2 hours. The bot was working, at odd hours. It would go through it. The accuracy was stunning. It was 98% last time I checked. And it was very resilient, because it was not a process that was going to change much. But even if it did, we focused on configuration versus customization, and that worked out quite well for us. So Sunny, made us quite happy, and there was a lot of appetite within the organization after looking at Sunny's performance. Mad Max turned out to be even better, actually. Mad Max was a bot that would, sorry, it wasn't Mad, it was just Max. Max would actually read through transactions on facilities management and basically find breaks or reconcile those transactions, find any breaks in the audit. This is a very standard process, not just facilities management. It applies to many other domains. But there is an aspect of this process. The external auditor mandates that we do about X% audit. And it is, if you think about the process of audit, it's looking at an invoice and checking those numbers on an Excel file. If you've ever done something like this, you'll realize it's a soul-crushingly boring job. We had people not wanting to do more than 4%, and we couldn't reach that, we couldn't go above that. And so, we decided to, we made a very wise decision to offshore the process, not realizing that the process continued to be boring offshore as well. So we had, we had a lot of people not doing the job. Like, we had attrition issues, we had knowledge management issues, and, it's just something that we found it really hard to tackle. So there came Max on the picture, and Max, because of the fact that Max has limited ability to think and very little creativity, was doing this job very happily at 3 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday. We were very happy about that. And Max was doing about 100% actually of transactions. What was actually particularly serendipitous about this is that we found that Max was recording every single transaction as it went through it. So at the end of it, Max was giving us trends and insights on what it found about these transactions. So which particular sites had more issues, which staff had more issues, which vendor had more issues. And the people who were doing this job earlier, who found it really boring, were now only following the breaks. So, all of a sudden, you'd sit in a room and there'd be constant conversations about what was going on with the operations. There'd be references to Max. And very few people knew that Max was not actually a person. And then, you'd get all these insights and trends, which were quite interesting. So we found that it actually lifted the employee morale. And since then, there's no turning back. So anyway, I'll just talk about the operating model frameworks. Because of the fact that these two were quite functional, really beneficial, there was a lot of appetite. We decided to have a bit of a framework for people to engage with us. And the idea was you could go view, wherein every single bot goes through this funnel, and then you build something. The problem with that is, it's very slow, and then you miss out on a lot of opportunities. We wanted this to be a bit more autonomous, but then on the autonomous side, you've got no sharing. So somewhere in the middle, as always, moderate wins. We've got the idea of federated model. The command center is a functional unit in each business unit, which drives its own agenda, a business agenda, primarily driven from automation in the command center for this. And then the central team, that's the team that I lead, we look after the frameworks and the education piece and ensuring and benefits and what more can we bring in. And our focus now is how do you actually lift this up one level and start talking about intelligent automation, bringing in AI capabilities, bringing in NLG, and all those other aspects of automation. I think I think everyone knows about this. The automation is actually a spectrum. It's not just one piece. It's a quiver of arrows, and RPA just happens to be one. Then we connected with NLG and NLP. That's you've got two arrows, and so on and so forth. So that's actually our focus now. And the idea was that the other thing we considered was we weren't necessarily we know insurance, I think we do. We know banking, but we're not necessarily the best bot builders in the world. We don't want to be, because soon enough this technology will be preceded by something else. So we want to be with someone whose core job is bot building. So we partnered with operational partners, and we got some results out of that. And that strategy has worked. And we've built internal capability, but not as a means to achieve the outcome, but almost as a result of the automation that we do. So it's a byproduct, and a really useful one, to be ready for the future. I talk about the command center as the functional people there, not what you see there. So we've got project manager, developers, process analysts, and SMEs sitting on the project side. So the command center would look at two things: lights on, let me continue running the bots I've got, and then project, what more can we do? What more can we do? Where can we go? And that part is driven by a business agenda. What do they want to do this year? Cost cutting, cost savings, revenue growth, customer engagement, whatever that might be. And we're a bit of a, well, not conglomerate, but we've got different business units, and each one has its own agenda, and we want to make sure that they're supported. On the supporting side, you've got business operations who have a vested interest in ensuring this runs, application owners who are an enabler because the bot works on the applications. Then you got the business communications, needless to say, they play an important role. Central team, so we support them, and the platform team. That's the technology that provides the base on which the bots are built. Here you have a spectrum there. I think I picked it up from somewhere. So essentially you've got RPA on the left-hand side, which is why we've experimented most with it. It's more well-established and it's not that complex. But on the right-hand side, as you go towards this side, it becomes more, experimental. But we are picking up components of that as we progress. So I think there is one thing I want to talk about here, which is why I think automation, particularly RPA, and actually others, are kind of here to stay. So the analogy I draw is that of manufacturing. So if you go back manufacturing 30 years ago, car assemblies, for instance, you had a lot of people working on the actual car, building it, or maybe even 40 years ago. They were building the cars. They were actually on the assembly, screwing the nuts and looking at the components. But then you had someone pick up those finished products and actually put that in a machine to test it, right? So it was a bit of automated testing, but manual, development or assembly. Then it was flipped. Now you have bots actually that build the cars, build the products, but then you have someone inspect the finished product to actually find what's wrong with it. And there's actually a reason behind it. That's because, one, we didn't have the technology to build. But the other thing is the space of testing what's wrong with something requires, it's a very vast field. Anything could be wrong with it. It could be multiple things. So you can't actually program that bit. It would be really hard. In the services industry, we didn't have the capability to actually automate that part. But now we do, because you've got presentational automation, you've got AI, you've got all these tools that actually mimic your user actions, and therefore you can actually build it. But the part of testing it, the part of ensuring that it continues to run, that still is with someone to actually test that. And therefore, we built we deliberated on this. There's a construct called the bot owner. What we feared when we started building bots was, like, if something goes wrong, and let's say Max got something wrong, you could be. And Max has no capability to defend itself. It's not there, it's a very low vocabulary actually, and finds it very hard to construct an argument. But what we've done though is we've actually got a construct of a bot owner. If Max does something wrong, John looks after it. So if Max has ever made anything wrong, it was actually John's responsibility to ensure that happens. That's just one of many operational frameworks. That's John leaving the country. Max had many, inspired us to put up these operational frameworks, which enabled us to ensure that these bots continue working. So change management framework, exception management framework, continuous improvement, continuous enhancement, bot ownership, and various other pieces. And I feel that's actually the more complex part. Building a bot isn't necessarily. Fixing your process, absolutely, is essential. But we've had that for a while. And the other reason why I think this is here to stay, that's probably making a tall claim, but I think it's going to be here for a while, is because straight through processing, you'll hear a lot of technology people talking about it, and there is nothing wrong with that construct. We have been trying to get it done for the last 30 years. Platforms have been sold to us saying this is straight through processing. You're never going to need anything else. But we always end up needing something else. And I think it's the reason for that is you have a finite budget for what seems like an infinite set of requirements. And so you end up having to do manual workarounds, for which we've got automation. Other considerations for this, obviously continuous transformation, so you want to include robotics as an optimization, and not just robotics, automation as an optimization lever in your KPIs, in your people's KPIs. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think we've done that actually that well, but there is certain parts of businesses that actually own that. So command centers for one. You've got to have automation, performance, and evolution as a key metric to find. Operating model, you want to be able to do enough so that there's momentum, but you also don't want to be on the bleeding edge. So there's always an idea of test, fail fast and fail small, which we've implemented. Capability build, we've actually talked about business leader immersion. There's a lot of, and there's not a lot of problem with this, because there's inherently a lot of interest in automation from business leaders, because they don't want to be left behind. So use that as a momentum. SME training and internal technical capability, build it as a result of that. Strategic planning, so look at your virtual workforce, where that's going to go. And lastly, change management. I can't emphasize on that enough, because I think change management could potentially break your systems. But if you do it right, it can enhance and enable it as well. I'm not sure I'm going to do full time, but that's it from our side.
Thank you very much, Sukant. If you just want to stay here for a second, if there's any questions from the floor. I noticed early on in your speech you mentioned that you're housed within Suncorp, I guess, within customer experience. Often people from outside the actual proper corporate world view it as a technology challenge. Can you explain why you think it's best housed there, and how you then interact with your colleagues from the technology department, for example?
Sorry, minor correction there. It's actually people experience.
People experience.
We're in HR,
right.
And the construct uses virtual workforce. But it sits there. It could very well sit in the customer experience piece. But I think we're looking at this as an enabler for better customer experience. So customer experience will know what the customers want. How do you actually get to it then becomes a problem. Now, if you go to technology, there's a bit of why should we do it? Let's change the platform. There's a bit of that. But the bigger problem is they're not necessarily the owners of the business problem. They're the owners of enablers for the business problem, primarily from a technology standpoint. This is a bit of a mix. This is right there between, because it's on the presentation layer, or with AI, it's modular. It can connect with your APIs to your core systems. Technology will lead your core systems, and you absolutely need those systems of records and engagement. Whereas this is more, what do we use this for? Build business solutions that actually deliver results. So while we've like I said, we're in people experience, so we're in HR, we enable the command centers that actually lead it from within business areas, and they tap into the practices that we've got and the capabilities and technology to build this.
Were any Suncorp employees nervous about the move to automation? We've spoken a little bit about the impact on existing employees, and most people say that they're excited by it, but there must be some level of anxiety as well.
If there is, I haven't seen it. Now, I'm sure at some stage there would be a level of apprehension. But frankly, what automation is enabling us to do is actually automate the road tasks. So we're taking, I think one of the consultants said this, we're taking the bot out of the human, so we're taking the road tasks, the ones that make you bored, and automating that. And I talked about that example where the people doing the audits were now following up on breaks, so they found it a lot more interesting. So they had a lot of fondness for Macs, but we've found similar results in other areas. So I think there might be eventually some sort of apprehension. We just haven't seen it. The other thing is we've got a few other bots that actually send out SMSs to customers at certain times, and that's increased our customer engagement and touch points. And to people who are working and connecting with customers, that's actually a great thing, because that enables them to build that rapport. But we weren't able to do that earlier because it takes so much effort, and we just couldn't afford it. But with a bot, we can, because it's highly scalable. You don't have to have 10 people doing that job. You just have to have one, and you can expand that across the country, or even New Zealand for that matter, and it'll work.
Are there any other questions from the floor at all? Pillar in the way. I'm just going to assume no one's waving from behind any of the pillars. Please join me then in thanking Sukant Saddi.
Thank you.